So after Belal Muhammad versus Leon Edwards just concluded at the UFC 304 main event, I think now's a good topical time to talk about the most boring fighters in the whole UFC. Now, being on this tier list by default doesn't make you a boring fighter objectively. It just means that there are many people out there who would classify this certain fighter as a boring fighter. Like, they're mentioned in the conversations of boring fighters, or they've been criticised in the past for having boring performances. I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's start off the list with the first entry, which is Sean Strickland. The public opinion on Sean Strickland has flip-flopped a little bit. Before he became really famous, around the time he was fighting Jack Hermanson, Uriah Hall, those sort of fights, he was sort of universally looked at as a very boring fighter, right? But he had quite a good streak after the Cannonier fight when he fought Nassourdine Imavov, which is pretty good. Then he stopped Abbas Magomedov in the second round, which is very impressive. So Strickland fun fight hype was at its highest at that point, and then he got the Adesanya fight, did all that talking in the press conference, and then obviously Strickland shocks the world in the Adesanya fight. Most people were expecting him to beat him, drops him in the first round, almost gets Adesanya out of there, and then schools him for the next 4 rounds. However, I think a lot of people have looked back on that fight and it is not that fun. It's not a fun fight, Strickland versus Adesanya, that much. And he does have quite rare fights where they're really good. I can't think of a really good Strickland fight, to be honest, right? But at the same time, I can't think of a Strickland fight that's really bad either. I think he gets a bit too much like hate in terms of how boring he is to watch, because as much as he throws jabs and throws teep kicks and whatever, at least he's like constantly active and throwing punches. As much as they don't have much heat on them and there's no danger of the fight being ended, at least it's like there's action going on in the ring. I think being a striker gives you cool points, in my opinion. So he's going in the B tier, right in the middle. Moving on to a fighter who's changed the public perception of him in recent years, we have the pound for pound number one, Mr. Islam Makhachev. Islam's going in the D tier not because he's boring by definition, but because you can see why people think he's boring. He has had boring performances in the past, right? That is true. You can't tell me that the Thiago Moises performance was really good. And when you watch the Volkanovski fight, who was it who was making the fight fun, really? Who was it? Who was going for takedowns? Makhachev. Yeah. Volk was keeping it standing. Islam was clinching against the cage, trying to hold The most boring round of that fight was round 1 because of Makhachev, and the end of round 4 because of Makhachev, right? So he's not a really fun fighter to watch, but he's decently fun. If you're a grappling purist, aka a gay person, you'll enjoy Makhachev's fights. You'll enjoy Makhachev's Sarukian 1. You're like, look at those transitions and all that. Listen, I understand it was a fun fight to watch from a technical standpoint, but I'm not going to sit down and think, I really need to watch Makhachev today. Do you know what I mean? It's just, he's not that fun. He's all right. Moving on to a relevant fighter who just fought yesterday, we have Leon Edwards in the B tier. Now, I see a lot of similarities between him and Strickland, to be honest. The difference really between him and Strickland is the fact that while Strickland's quite active, he's throwing a lot of strikes in one fight, but none of them really have any power to them, so there's no danger. Leon's the opposite, really. Leon throws like exclusively hard, significant strikes, but there's not much of them. Do you know what I mean? He'll throw maybe like 5 strikes in about a minute. He's not active in the cage whatsoever, right? And let's be real, Leon had some of the most boring 5-rounders you will ever see, right? Edwards versus Rafael dos Anjos. Shit fight. Listen, it took him to knock out Usman in the 5th round for people to think he's entertaining. Before that, it was just decision after decision after decision after decision after decision. He's just a bit lame. But I do like watching him from a technical standpoint, like just to watch his cleanness, his like adeptness on the feet. It's very fun to watch if you're in that mood. Now, moving on to the most boring fighter on the list so far, we have Mr. Magomed Ankalaev. Listen, does Ankalaev have knockouts? Yes. But does Magomed Ankalaev have good fights? No. Right? No, he doesn't. Now, you can say he has the occasional quick one where the Walker rematch was decently fun. The first Walker fight was fun while it lasted. But that's because it's Johnny Walker, right? Johnny Walker made that fight fun by just being him, right? If Magomed Ankalaev had his way, he would either be just standing at range, landing the occasional leg kick or jab, or he'd be on the ground just on top doing nothing. He has no finishing ability on the ground whatsoever. On the feet, he's got finishing ability, but he will only go for it if he thinks he's got the perfect opportunity. Now, you might say he's basically the same as Leon Edwards. Why isn't he on the same tier as Leon Edwards? Why don't you move Leon up to A tier? He's Dagestani, and I'm being biased, so he's in the A tier. Moving on to a fighter who's had a fight announced recently. That is the bantamweight, Merab Dvalishvili. Now, does Merab fight at a very, very high pace? Yes. But what does he do with that high pace is the problem, right? Because you will rarely see a Merab opponent damaged after the fight. Sure, yeah, Piotr Jan had a swollen eye at the end of the fight. But did you ever think during that fight, ooh, he's in danger here, he's hurt by Merab? That was a big right hand that he took. Not really. Merab lands little slight sloppy punches as he goes for his takedowns or to set up his takedowns. All he wants to do is just take someone to the ground, hold him there, make the other guy get up. They escape, they separate. He does the same thing, takes him down again. It's rinse and repeat. Now, I'd say based on his last two fights, I wouldn't really put him in the B tier. I'd put him a bit lower, but I cannot forgive that Aldo performance. That Aldo performance, right? Diabolical, I'm telling you. You've got a UFC legend in front of you. He's about to retire, right? This is his big retirement fight. You can at least give him a good send-off, right? What does he do? He clinches him against the cage, holds the back, and just knees Aldo in the thigh over and over again, right? That is not fighting, in my opinion. When I think of fighting, I do not think of someone holding the shorts of the other man and then kneeing their thigh over and over again in the same spot. Not only is that boring to watch, it's also just, it demeans the sport in general, in my opinion, which is why he's on the list. We move on to a fighter who you may either think he should be higher or you think he shouldn't be on the list whatsoever. We have Mr. Israel Adesanya, the dog bender himself. Now, Adesanya is funny because people who really hate Adesanya will tell you he's one of the most boring fighters in the UFC. Either Adesanya fans or casuals who've only just got into the sport will tell you that he's fun to watch. He's got one of the coolest fight styles in the world, right? If you only watch highlights of Adesanya or you've seen his good fights only, I understand, right? If you just watched his Gastelum fight, you just watched that one highlight video of the Silva fight, you've just watched the Costa performance, you just watched the Bahia knockout, I understand. But in between those fights, you have stinker after stinker after stinker. From Costa till the first Bahia fight was just poo. Straight poo over and over again. Listen to this run, yeah. After Costa, he had Blachowicz, right? Not a great fight, low pace. Not too bad, but not a good fight either. Then you have Vettori, right? Lame, just a lame fight. Then you have the Whittaker rematch, probably his worst fight. Besides Romero, it's probably his worst fight. Then you have Cannonier. Who cares? You know what I mean? Then you have the Bahia fight, which is great, to be fair. Bahia fight was great. After that, you have Bahia rematch. Knocks him out, fair enough. But then straight back to boringness after when he fights Sean Strickland. His issue in the Strickland fight wasn't that... I don't think it was entirely the fact that Strickland was levels above him in the striking. I think it's genuinely just Adesanya is scared to engage in that sort of fight. I don't think he's built for a one-on-one dogfight. Do you know what I mean? He is more built for circling and on the back foot, throwing leg kicks at a distance. That's what he's built for, basically. That's why his style is what it is. So Adesanya, he's a striker and he's got some great fights on his record. So he's gone in C tier. He's gone below Leon and Strickland. But I'll put him a bit more boring than Makhachev just because there's not much finishing ability, to be honest. Adesanya's lost his finishing ability, to be honest. I know he knocked out Bahia, but listen, it took Bahia to stand in front of him, throwing 2 left hooks in a row with his hands completely down for Adesanya to get a knockout. That's what it took for him to get a knockout, right? Moving on to another Nigerian on the list, we have the Nigerian nightmare himself, Kamaru Usman. Now, if this tier list was made in 2020 or 2019, he'd be S tier, like, for sure, right? I think vintage Usman, like classic Usman from 2017 to 2020, might be one of the most boring run of a fighter we've ever seen, ever. I mean, he had fights like the Damian Maia fight, piss fight. The Woodley fight was decent because it was so dominant, but there was not much going on, really, right? Listen, Colby Covington, that fight, one of the best fights of all time, I understand. But then afterwards, you get the first fight with Masvidal, which was just piss, right? He was known for foot stomping, right, for a long time, until he finally switched it around and started knocking people out when he fought Burns the first time. Then he knocked out Masvidal, then he had a decent scrap with Colby the second time, then he... I think we saw quite a vintage Usman in the second and third Edwards fights. Do you know what I mean? But you can't really erase that old Usman that we saw for a number of years where it was just piss, boring fights. Do you know what I mean? 30% Usman. What a boring fighter he used to be. I'm telling you. I'm very glad he switched it around. Now, our next spot is taken by the man himself. The man you came here to see. And his name is Belal Muhammad. Now, Belal was destined for S tier, at least A tier. That's what he was destined for when he clicked on this video. That's just how it was going to go. He gained some fans after he knocks out Sean Brady, but every boring fighter on this list has knocked out at least someone. Do you know what I mean? Or they've got at least one really good fight that's keeping them from being on the S tier. Belal's just got a consistency. Like, there's a reason he's known for being as boring as he is, right? Because he's just... When you watch the Vicente Luque rematch, yeah, not one part of that fight had me thinking, Belal, he's tough. He's built for fighting. Even though he won the fight and he... Obviously, he's a UFC fighter, so he's built for fighting, but he does not seem like he wants to get into a fight. He wants to circle around, avoid damage at all costs, then shoot a takedown. That's what he wants to do. Against Gilbert Burns, he couldn't finish one-armed Gilbert Burns, right? That's silliness. Absolute silliness. He had 5 rounds to do it, and he could not. He couldn't even, like, really do any damage either. Like, he had a one-armed opponent right in front of him, just standing there, and he thought, I'm going to be boring. That's what he thought in his head. And then before the Sean Brady fight, what do you have on his record? The Damian Maia fight? Balls. Before that, what do you have? Really? Just nothing stands out, honestly. He's in the S tier. He's supposed to be. We're going to stay on the S tier with another fighter who is... I don't think it's mentioned enough on the Boring Fighters conversations. We have Mr. Aljamain Sterling, the Funk Master. Now, Aljamain Sterling. When was the last good fight he had, really? Think about it. He had his last fight was Calvin Kattar, 3 rounds of nothing. That's what it was. Before that, Sean O'Malley. But was it good because of... to be honest, let's be real, that wasn't really a good fight either. That was just a round of them two messing around. Then O'Malley knocks him out. Before that, he had the Cejudo fight. Before that was the Dillashaw fight. Dillashaw had one arm. That doesn't count. Before that, the second Yan fight. The second Yan fight was boring as hell. That was really boring, let's be honest. I'd actually say that was the most boring title fight of that year. Right, because think about it. The first round was Sterling circling for his life for 5 straight minutes, throwing teep kicks and failing takedowns. Second round, same thing until Aljo eventually gets the back and just sits there and lands little punches and keeps him there. Round 3, exact same thing, keeps Yan in a body triangle for another 3 minutes. Rounds 4 and 5, right? Aljo knows he's taken the first 3, so he just enters full survival mode. He circles and then waits for Yan to get close enough, and he just dips down. Enters the same fetal position he was in the first fight. They got Yan disqualified, and just sits there. He accepts that he's going to win he wins the fight because he won the first 3 rounds. That's not a fighter, in my opinion. I mean, it is because he's a champion. He won a belt that way, but that's not fighting, in my opinion. That's, I don't know what you call that, gimping away. Moving on, we have another fighter who I don't think it's mentioned enough in the most boring fighters conversations. We have the arguable GOAT of the sport, Jon Jones. Now, I could put him even higher, to be honest, but I'm going to leave him C tier because he's got a decent amount of good fights on his record. Right, the DC rematch was great, well lasted. Gustafsson fight was great, well lasted. The Reyes fight was pretty good. But when you look outside of those fights, we're looking at like what? Cyril Gane submitted him 1 round, fair enough. And before that, what do you have? We have absolute piss fights, let's be honest. Thiago Santos was a very boring fight. Anthony Smith was just Smith doing what he does best as a lionheart, which is curling up in the fetal position and accepting defeat. Before that, Gustafsson was just a fat mess at that point, in my opinion. Before that, obviously he got done for steroids. He's had some boring fights across his entire career, to be honest. He's a bit of a decision merchant, right? Went the distance with Glover Teixeira. Decent fight. Not great, though. Rashad Evans, decent fight, not great, though. Ovin St. Preux, that was a guy he should have finished, but he didn't. I don't think he's naturally inclined to get finishes, in my opinion. Unless he's completely on the sauce, which is when he got the knockout versus Daniel Cormier. I don't think he's one of those fighters who are naturally just, I want to get a finish. He's just like, I'm going to see what happens in a fight. You know what I mean? Which is why he's in the C tier. Moving on to the S tier again, we have Jailton Almeida. He's on the S tier for very similar reasons to Belal Muhammad and Aljamain Sterling, because he's not in there to fight. Do you know what I mean? When you see their fights, that's not how you imagine a fight playing out. That's how you imagine just gayness. When people who don't really watch MMA describe MMA, or like when boxing fans describe MMA as just men hugging, Belal, Aljo, Almeida, they're the perfect stereotypes of just men hugging in MMA fights. That's what they are. I don't see a moment where Jailton Almeida's on the feet and he doesn't look like he wants to go to the ground. He always looks like he wants to get sweaty with another man. It's enough talk about sweaty men. Let's move on to another fighter who's in the D tier, the very opposite side of the spectrum, which is Ian Garry. Now, if we're basing it purely on the last 2 performances, he'd be like on the A or B tier, because the Jeff Neal performance, even though it was a lot of striking, it wasn't great to watch. It was very low pace. Garry running for his life, basically. And the MVP fight stunk up the whole fight, basically. Horrible. I keep burping. Horrible fight, basically. But I can't put too much blame on Ian Garry because MVP's takedown defence is rubbish. Absolutely horrendous. If he didn't take him down, that wouldn't make any sense. Like, when you've got a guy who's as dangerous on the feet as MVP, who's explosive, unpredictable, if you're not taking him down, you're stupid and you don't want to win a fight, right? As much as I'll criticise other fighters for only wanting to go to the ground, if you aren't going to the ground against MVP, you're stupid. So I can't give him too much flack for that. I can give him flack for the Jeff Neal fight, but he fought reasonably smart. Do you know what I mean? You can't get in a straight-up boxing match with Jeff Neal and win. That's how you get knocked out. That's why he got dropped by Kenan Song in that one fight. And that was a good fight. Him and Kenan Song, that was pretty fun. Before that, he He has some good knockouts, knocked out D-Rod, knocked out Jordan Williams, had a reasonably good fight with Gabe Green, but he's not a naturally really fun fighter. Like, he's quite a circler, he's a bit like Izzy. Listen, to be honest, he's low down on the list because of that Neil Magny fight. That Magny fight was very fun to watch, right? Even though I like Magny, it's just such bullying in the ring has never been seen before. He gets a low place on the list. Moving on back to the B tier, we have the current flyweight champion, Alexandre Pantoja. Now, just like Ian Garry, if we're basing it on the last 2-3 fights, A or S tier, basically. Probably S tier, honestly. But because Pantoja has a history of very fun fights, like the third Moreno fight, very good. Scrap, very good war, the first 3 rounds. Last 2 rounds a bit, but, you know, before that. The Figueiredo fight was really good. That was a very good fight. Him and Davison Figueiredo, that was a great fight. Him steamrolling Alex Perez the way he did, great to watch. The second Moreno fight was pretty good to watch as well. Like him just schooling Brandon Moreno in their second fight a long time ago. He's got some good fights on his record. But the last 2, Brandon Royval and Steve Erceg, he's there to slug some random shite punches out there and then get the takedown and then keep him there for the rest of the round. That was the entire Brandon Royval fight. Yeah. The only entertainment from that fight was just the idea that maybe Royval just randomly throws something out there and knocks him out. Right. Besides that, it was just Pantoja standing there really drunk looking, and then he just gets a double leg and he's on top for the rest of the round. That's how it was. Erceg fight as well. I think he lost the Erceg fight personally, but he did not want to do anything on the feet really. He just wanted to slap some punches out there and then trying to get a takedown at the end of it, which, to be fair to him, it worked. It won him the fight in the judges' eyes, but, you know, is it fun to watch? Not really. He's going in B tier. Moving on a bit higher, we have another Dagestani on the list, and that is Umar Nurmagomedov. Did he showcase some good striking in some of his early UFC fights, like against Sergey Morozov, against Iona Barcelos? Yes, he did. But what's he done recently, though? Like, what was his last fight, really? Like, that was just desperate takedowns the whole way through and control time. He had decent, like, ground and pound while he's on top, but he just always looked like he wants to start wrestling. That's the issue with a lot of fighters on this list. If they just look like they always want to be on the ground, that's not fighting, in my opinion. So, Umar Nurmagomedov, not much to say about him. He's got some striking, which is why he's not on the S tier. And he does a decent ground and pound, so he's dangerous enough to not be completely boring. But he's not great to watch. I don't sit down and think I want to watch Umar Nurmagomedov fight. I'm fully expecting that Sandhagen fight next week to be boring as hell. Just from Umar's holding him down for 5 rounds, maybe getting a sub, who knows. Anyway, we move on to the last placement on this list, and that is Mohamed Makhachev. He's got this exact same issue as Aljamain Sterling. He's pretty much the same fighter as Aljamain Sterling, in my opinion, right? Because he's just constant trying to get takedowns, trying to take the back. If he can't get it, he's just laying on his knees, basically. Listen, I can't wait. Listen, a lot of these fighters are going to, once that new grounded knee rule's gone, right? Jailton Almeida, Aljamain Sterling, Mohamed Makhachev, Umar, Merab especially. Once that grounded knee rule gets introduced on the 1st of November, they've got to start making changes, right? Because they can't lie on their knees and expect to be safe. That doesn't make sense to me either, by the way. Like, how are you on your knees in a fight and that's where you can't take any damage? That wouldn't make any sense. If you're on your knees in a street fight, that just means you're going to get fucking clobbered. In an MMA fight, that you're safe in that position don't make sense to me. Anyway, Makhachev's a very big, like, grounded knee rule merchant. He wants that knee to come, or he's he knows that the knee can't come, otherwise he'll get the other guy disqualified. So that Alex Perez fight was just... He wasn't fighting Alex Perez. He was fucking... I don't know what he was doing in that fight. That was lame as hell. Not much more to say. If you disagree, leave a comment. Help the algorithm. Give me some views. Goodbye.